You finally have time to work on something you actually care about, something you've been thinking about for weeks. And instead of starting, you suddenly need to clean your room, check your phone, make coffee, or do literally anything else. And the strange part is that you're not avoiding something you hate. You're avoiding something you actually want. So why does something you care about become the exact thing you keep running away from? Maybe the problem isn't that you don't want it. Maybe something about wanting it is making it harder to begin. Welcome to the inner room. Let's go deeper. The first thing we need to get rid of is the idea that procrastination simply means you're lazy. Research suggests that procrastination is strongly connected to how unpleasant a task feels, how far away its reward is, how capable you expect yourself to be, and how well you regulate your attention and impulses. So instead of asking why you're too lazy to do something, it can be more useful to ask what happens inside you when you think about doing it. Because sometimes the task itself isn't difficult. The feeling attached to it is. Think about writing something you really care about. Opening the document takes 5 seconds, but suddenly you're thinking about whether it will be good enough, whether anyone will like it, whether you'll finish it, and what it would mean if you failed. Now the task is carrying much more emotional weight than it did a few minutes ago. You're no longer responding only to the task. You're responding to what the task represents. And that raises a more uncomfortable question. If the task itself isn't what you're trying to escape, what are you actually running from? This is where procrastination gets more interesting. Research has described procrastination partly as a form of short-term mood regulation. You look at the task and feel uncomfortable, whether that's boredom, anxiety, uncertainty, frustration, or pressure. Then you postpone it, and for a moment, that feeling gets quieter. You scroll, watch something, make yourself busy, and suddenly you feel a little better. But nothing about the task has changed. You only changed how you feel about it for the next few minutes. Sirois and Pychyl argue that this short-term mood repair is an important part of understanding procrastination, because immediate relief can win over a larger reward that exists somewhere in the future. So you may not be choosing between doing the task and doing nothing. You may be choosing between feeling uncomfortable now and feeling relieved now, and your future self gets the bill. But here's where it gets interesting. If you're willing to escape the feeling even when the thing you're avoiding is something you deeply want, why does wanting it create so much discomfort in the first place? What makes an important goal feel emotionally threatening? Sometimes a goal stops being just a goal. It becomes a test of who you are. If you want to start a business, finishing the first real version means discovering whether you can actually do it. If you want to write, publishing something means allowing people to judge something that came from you. And if you want to apply for a job, sending the application makes rejection real in a way that thinking about the job never did. The closer you get to actually trying, the more real the possibility of failure becomes. Research does find a relationship between procrastination and perfectionistic concerns, although it's more complicated than saying perfectionists always procrastinate. The important question is whether your goal is pushing you forward or making you afraid of what the outcome will say about you. Because if I want to do this quietly becomes I need to prove that I can do this, starting becomes much harder. As long as you're planning, researching, organizing, or waiting for the perfect moment, you can keep the possibility alive without actually testing yourself. You haven't failed, but you haven't really tried either. And that is what makes procrastination feel strangely safe. But if avoiding the task protects you from finding out what you're capable of, what happens when that protection becomes a habit? Now we can see the loop. You care about something. That importance creates pressure. The pressure creates discomfort. You avoid the task. The avoidance gives you temporary relief. Then the deadline gets closer. The pressure increases, and you feel worse about yourself for avoiding it. So you promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow comes, the task still feels uncomfortable, and the cycle starts again. This is why simply telling yourself to be more disciplined often doesn't solve the problem. You're trying to fight the behavior without understanding what the behavior is doing for you. You're not necessarily choosing failure, you're choosing relief. And you're making that choice at a moment when the future consequences feel psychologically distant. So the behavior keeps getting reinforced, not because you actually want to stay stuck, but because every time you avoid the discomfort, your brain gets a small reward for avoiding it. And now the question changes again. If procrastination is protecting you from a feeling, how do you stop fighting yourself long enough to actually begin? The first step isn't forcing yourself to become more motivated. When you notice yourself avoiding something important, ask what feels uncomfortable about beginning. Is it uncertainty? Is it the possibility of doing badly? Is it the pressure to do it perfectly? Or are you simply choosing immediate relief over a delayed reward? That changes the question from, I am lazy, to something about starting this feels difficult. And now you have something you can actually work with. The second step is separating the task from what it means about you. Writing one bad page doesn't mean you're a bad writer. Sending one application doesn't determine your worth. Starting imperfectly doesn't prove that you're incapable. The task is an action. It doesn't have to become a verdict on your identity. And finally, make the beginning specific. Don't tell yourself you'll work on it tomorrow. Decide exactly when and where you'll begin, and what the first action will be. Research on implementation intentions suggests that specific if-then plans can help turn intentions into action. So instead of, I'll work on my project tomorrow, try, when I finish my coffee tomorrow morning, I'll sit at my desk and work on the first paragraph for 20 minutes. You're not trying to finish everything. You're making the beginning easier to execute. And sometimes that's enough to break the first link in the chain. Because sometimes the thing you keep postponing isn't something you secretly don't want. It's something you want enough that trying feels vulnerable. You don't need to feel ready before you begin. You don't need the first step to prove anything about you. Maybe it only needs to be a first step. This is the work of the inner room. Not to tell you how to become more productive, but to help you understand what you're really running from. If this made you stop and see yourself differently, subscribe and post this in the comments. What is one thing you keep putting off even though you really want it? I'll see you in the next room.